Meeple Nation Podcast, episode 416, Games with Miniatures, or Games I Found on Kickstarter.
I like it.
Welcome, citizens of Meeple Nation. For the next 30 minutes, sit back and enjoy.
Meeple Nation Podcast is sponsored by GameToppersLLC.com. Go to their website, check out their amazing products. They have so much more cool stuff now than they did when I first went there. They have upgraded the tables. They have dining leaves that can go on it. They have extension leaves that can go in it to make your table longer. Legs that can make your topper a table. And they have mats that are beyond awesome. Go to their website, check them out. All sorts of amazing stuff. We love ours. Pretty much guarantee if you get it, you will love yours. That's GameToppersLLC.com.
We are the hosts of Meeple Nation. I am Andy Holliday.
I'm Nathan Howard.
I'm Logan Howard.
And we are missing Dave tonight.
We swapped out Dave for Logan.
Yes.
I was going to say there had to be 3, and so it just worked out with my schedule that I was able to come tonight, just magically.
Before we recorded, Dave told me to say something that he would say, and I informed him that I am not witty. And then he told me it, but oh so pretty. So apparently I have a face for TV, but not a voice for radio. That's what I got out of it anyway. But that's not here nor there. Anyway, check out our website. We have all of our previous episodes. That website is at meeplenation.com. On our website, we have all of our previous episodes that you can go in and listen to and check out. We also have blogs, weekly blogs, bios for all 4 of us, plus we have bios of our bloggers. We also have pictures, different things you can check out of what we got going on at Meeple Nation. If you enjoy what we do, would like to support us and help us make Meeple Nation better and improve our podcasts, you can jump onto Patreon and donate on Patreon and help us out in that way. Greatly appreciated. It will help us to get more equipment and make the experience better for you all. If you have any questions or comments, then you can get a hold of us at meeplenation@gmail.com.
This week we are discussing games that either offer or include miniatures in some part. That doesn't mean all the playing pieces are miniature, but at least some of those pieces are miniatures. And like Logan said, Kickstarters are well known for packing those games full of miniatures. Some of the Kickstarters that we've backed, I am positive will sneak into this episode for sure. So to start it off, we seem to always go to Gloomhaven. Why not talk about Gloomhaven first?
Why not?
We're looking forward to dipping our toes back into the Gloomhaven pool and getting some of our plays in. Gloomhaven is a game where all the monsters are standees. However, the heroes have individual miniatures, which I think works out pretty good. And we've talked in the past, do miniatures make or break a game? For Gloomhaven in particular, to me, I think works great with the standees. Had they put miniatures in there? Look at my copy of Secrets of the Lost Station. Includes both standees and, for the Kickstarter exclusive, had miniatures. But the box for the miniatures is 3 times as big as the actual game itself. Our miniatures are cool for sure, but I've never been disappointed in my plays of Gloomhaven because it doesn't include miniatures.
I think that Gloomhaven, there's just so much content in that box. It's a huge box as it is, with the standees for the monsters. And I can't even imagine how big they'd have to make that game if they had a miniature for every single standee. It would be a similar situation that you have with Secrets of the Lost Station. You'd have a box that was at least twice as big as the Gloomhaven box, and the Gloomhaven box is huge already. You consider how hard it is, the storage solutions that you've seen people come up with for Gloomhaven. Both you and I kind of did something different for our storage solution to try to fit everything in that box as it is. I agree with you, Nathan. I don't think that miniatures ever necessarily make or break a game. If a miniature makes or breaks a game, that means the game probably wasn't that great of a game.
So I go back to Nemesis. Nemesis has...
The miniatures there are awesome.
The miniatures there are amazing.
Yeah.
The sculpts that they've used. To consider playing that game without those, I feel the game would very much be lacking in the experience.
Yeah, I guess that's true. And you bring up a good point. If there's a cinematic element to the game, which with that game there absolutely is.
Which, by the way, was found on Kickstarter.
Yes, it was. And you're right. With standees, it would still be a fun game, though, I guess is my point. The game stands alone without the miniatures. I love minis. Always improves my experience with a game, but it never makes or breaks a game for me, as much as I do love them. Like what you were playing, Nathan, it can make it more cinematic. It can make it help me immerse myself in the game more.
Going along those same lines, Big Trouble in Little China is another game that I feel the miniatures aren't necessarily required, but yeah, the miniatures make... It could be going back to that whole cinematic feel that you've seen these figures on the big screen, and then to put them in a miniature form as opposed to having just a standee, a nostalgic link that binds those two together. Nemesis isn't based on aliens, but Nemesis is based on aliens.
Right.
And we'll be talking about both of those games more next week. I see the desire for miniatures for sure. I commonly say that I don't think miniatures are required for a game, but there are some games that are greatly enhanced due to miniatures.
Another game that we found on Kickstarter, The Reckoners, Stillheart, Brandon Sanderson. The Kickstarter edition comes with an actual Stillheart figure. But there's only like 4 or 5 figures in the entire game. But I think that they greatly improved the feel of the game. They don't need minis to represent all the epics or the bad guys. The amount of effort that they put into those figures that they have, it makes a difference. It's called Stillheart. You get still pieces. You're like, yeah, that's pretty cool.
I kind of agree with you there. When you get those little red minis, the bad guys, right? When they get put on that location, it seems more...
Oh, no, there's too many of them.
Yeah, you're more desperate to get rid of them. It just looks like there's a lot more danger there. Or
Instead of a cube or a standee.
Instead of a cube or a standee or a token, it just looks more intimidating.
Again, I don't think that it's diminished that they don't have minis for everything. The epics, all they have is the little sliding track to denote how powerful they are. You could have a couple of those epics out at the same time that are wrecking you. That makes the game super difficult. It visually just doesn't compare to that overwhelming feeling you see, right?
Right. So I guess my question is, as far as, does it change anything for you guys, painted versus unpainted minis, or even a wash?
Like the Sundrop
wash that's on them. Does that change anything for you as far as what the minis do to a game, or is it doesn't matter at all to you?
Oh, I think it does, for sure. I personally have no painting skills. Last year at Extra Life, Andy, you and I played Mythic Battles Pantheon. You had made some terrain that replaced some of the components that came with the game. Yeah, that terrain, that made a world of difference. For a game where you play that 3D feel, that's huge compared to going back to Gloomhaven, where all the tokens or anything that's on the board that you're going to interact with is just a token, piece of cardboard that's laid on the game board. And even jumping from that to Descent Legends of the Dark, it's simple cardboard. There's nothing plastic there. The miniatures are plastic, but it's just cardboard terrain. Even the floors will stack and you can go up the stairs. That made a huge impact in the experience and the enjoyment of the game. Tailing this all back to painted minis or not, I thoroughly enjoy painted minis. I don't enjoy painting minis because there's just no skill there for me. When somebody else has done it, there's a great appreciation for sure. The Star Wars X-Wing miniature game, the detail that Fantasy Flight put into those miniatures, I didn't stay in that game for very long because it was just so overwhelming, the amount of content that they were kicking out. The detail that is in those miniature X-Wings, Millennium Falcon, all those ships is awesome. And it does bring an enjoyment to that game where I look at Firefly, where Firefly just has the mold of the Serenity, is just in different colors. That's the playing pieces. If you had each of those uniquely painted, that would be pretty cool. And people have done that. And I've even ordered extra ships that Gale Force 9 had put out that you could paint. I bought them because I thought they were already painted. And much to my disappointment, when I got these plain gray ships, they weren't painted. But no, I totally appreciate and enjoy painted miniatures. And to even go further back, I mean, you look at Star Wars Legion and compare that to the Star Wars miniatures game, where you would buy those miniature packs and they came with pre-painted figures.
Yep.
That detail in those figures isn't amazing.
No, it's not, but they're painted.
But they're painted, and compare that to Star Wars Legion, And Star Wars Legion is more meant for target audience that
Right.
Warhammer is.
The war gamers, right?
Yeah, where they want to manipulate and be able to customize these figures themselves. That's not me. I enjoyed playing Star Wars Legion. The reason I don't play it anymore, it's a 2-player game, just never have the opportunity to get it to that table. But I bought plenty of scenery. I bought some Star Wars-esque scenery and some castle scenery, some ruin scenery to play around, and even went to the thrift store and bought some rocks and some
random pieces of wood.
Yeah, that all kind of made it so that it was more thematic, right? Which was great. Added all that texture and that feel, immersed you more in the game than, say, Gloomhaven would. Even though Gloomhaven's a great game, my immersive level between Gloomhaven and games like Descent, Legends of the Dark, Star Wars Legion, Mythic Battles, Pantheon, that level of immersion is completely different than it is compared to Gloomhaven.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And the interesting thing is to see what all the games that have come out with, like you said, Gloomhaven just has flat tokens for anything else besides, you have the standees for the monsters, you have the miniatures for the heroes, flat tokens for everything else. There's other games out there that have kind of done a combination of flat tokens or maybe a few 3D pieces, maybe there's a chest or something like that. We just got Hero Quest, the new edition of Hero Quest. I compared the miniature pieces between the heroes and the monsters and all the 3D terrain that came with it versus the original version that released in the 90s. Let me tell you that they have come a long way in the last 30 years. Well, that makes me feel old.
You are getting old.
But they really have. Back then, those were just the coolest things ever. They were 3D terrain in a dungeon crawler game. It was just the coolest. But it was all just cheap cardboard that super easy to get ruined. And yeah, it had some plastic components to the cardboard that kind of held everything together, but everything's really high quality plastic now. Yeah, the components in that are amazing in the new version. Drastically enhances the game, for me anyway, just to have higher quality stuff. Now, mind you that the cardboard stuff was, it's colored, right? And all the stuff that came with the game is unpainted. And I actually like to paint stuff, but I just have no time to paint stuff. When I have so much stuff to paint, it's a little overwhelming, really.
That's why there's all those memes out there of you can't buy new games until you've painted the miniatures you already have.
I would never buy a game probably for the next 10 years if that was the case.
Yeah.
So we all need more friends like Doug because his daughter, Autumn, is more than willing to paint things and she doesn't require a lot of money to do so.
Jim Clark, his son, was all anxious to paint stuff as well. I was all for having him paint my stuff because, again, going back to what you asked earlier, yeah, they look better when they're painted.
Well, going back to what you asked earlier, because I'm lazy, the sun drop, I think they look amazing.
Well, and really, you're right. I mean, if you're not going to paint them, even just doing a wash on the minis, just to bring out that detail, especially of sculpts that are really, really well done, totally worth it. And you can honestly do that yourself too, and it's not super expensive and actually pretty easy to do versus taking the time to actually paint.
Yeah,
just doing a wash is simple.
I've watched videos and I still pay the companies to sun drop them.
Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that in my book, Logan, because I've paid extra to have Kickstarter stuff upgraded. I've thought about it when I've backed a game that they'll paint the minis, but that cost is pretty pricey.
Yeah, it's substantial.
Oh, sure. I remember when we were looking at the Lockdown Kickstarter and the price for like fully painted minis was outrageous.
It takes a lot of skill and a lot of time and a lot of patience to do that.
Oh, they looked beautiful though.
Yeah.
I would love to play with that edition. I would not want to pay for it. The time that it would take for me and maybe it's because I'm not a creative person that way. There would be so much stress to do it, then I get mad that it doesn't look right because I suck at it. I think my experience of the game would be lessened if I did that. Just doing a wash, I bet I could get into. It just requires some paint and some spraying, and that's it. I think they're totally worth painted. I think Sundrop looks fantastic. I look forward to paying Doug's daughter to paint more of my stuff.
There you go.
Especially when you find someone that enjoys it, right? And they don't mind earning a little bit of money and you get your stuff painted. I just get games donated to me so I can paint them.
That's my favorite is when Nathan actually comes over and he's like, that game's on my 10 for 10. Oh, wait, that's my game.
It was my 10 by 1. There was 3 of them over there.
Yeah. Putting my games on your 10x1. That's nice.
I did that last year. It worked out. I was able to do it.
It worked out.
Taverns, what a great game. Speaking of minis, last Solcom we went to, your cousin Max, he let us use his printed upgraded components for taverns, and they were so cool.
Yeah, they really were. He did a good job on those.
Did he do that, or did he get them from Miniatures Market?
No, he printed the little mug with the frothy. He printed that, painted it,
and then just the little schnapps things. He just did it himself.
Yeah,
I think that Miniatures Market sells the exact same thing.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah,
so
I saw him post the Facebook process of when he was doing it, so I'm pretty sure he made them.
Might have got the STL files from
Or
someone
he could have just got the idea and just knew how to do it.
Yeah. And that's the other thing that is really cool, the invention of the 3D printer. People can take that flat 2-level game, bring it to a whole new destination. The first one that I remember seeing was Terraforming Mars, where people had started printing 3D pieces for Terraforming Mars. Actually, I'll go back further than that. There was a 3D version of Settlers of Catan that came out. That's a really, really nice wood version. It has all those 3D pieces, the mountains, the fields. How much that enhanced the look and the appeal of the game. The next big one that I'd noticed where somebody had taken that base game or that flat game and gave it depth was the Terraforming Mars. But that led to Stronghold offering that 3D version in their big box, which was again pricey, but I guess it was well worth it. I've only played my version once, so I don't know if it was that well worth it. To see people playing that with the cities, with the domes, and even the domes on underwater cities is an improvement, I think, to the base game. Or to
add that flat game, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a game that I wasn't able to play this past weekend at BryceCon, which I thought looked really interesting. Same kind of idea, Cloud City.
Yeah, that was really interesting. That was cool. Cloud City, you're building basically skyscrapers. So you lay down a tile that has 2 squares. They'll either be blue, brown, or green. And you're going to place a skyscraper or a building that matches that color. And then you're building tunnels or bridges from the top of the skyscraper to another skyscraper of the same color. Very cool game. By the time you end up finishing the game, it's really cool to see what everybody's cities look like. I got destroyed, but it was fun.
It was no Red Rising?
It was...
What a game that would be improved by minis.
You had to bring that up, didn't you?
Kind of getting off subject from games that have miniatures to games that have 3D components. Let's pull it back to some games that have...
How would you, differentiate between it? Because to me, they're very much interlocked.
Cloud City doesn't have miniatures. Terraforming Mars doesn't have miniatures. And the difference is you're not using those pieces as pawn. You're not moving those. They're placed on the board as more scenery. But whereas miniature, you're moving more of those miniatures, manipulating them as they move across the board. Cloud City, you're adjusting that as you're building your cities up. Still kind of the same. I mean, miniature is a figure. It represents something that's alive or you're interacting with.
I think I would disagree with you because still, to me, minis and 3D components, they're just so linked to me because it's bringing that game from that 2D to that 3D and how it interacts with each other. Get what you're saying, your definition of minis, yes, it's very much so. But for me, a game having minis or miniature type components would include 3D component.
And I can see that. I would agree with that. Whether you're doing 3D components or 3D miniatures, 3D components are a little more rare than 3D miniatures.
Agreed. I mean, because they're way more expensive.
I think it's just been common practice more to include miniatures that represent your character more so than it has been to include terrain pieces or anything like that.
Oh yeah, because it's much more exciting to be like, hey, look at this dragon dude, he looks so awesome, instead of, hey, look, they have a tree.
Yeah.
And that's not just my definition. That's a general definition, but that's doesn't mean that's the definition by any mean. Okay.
Speaking of,
because when I looked up on BGG miniature games, Monopoly did not come up.
Did the old school Game of Life come up where it had the terrain pieces that would go the hills?
The hills, yeah. And the mansion at the end, the retirement home at the end.
Yeah, they had all sorts of plastic pieces on there, didn't they?
Yeah. I guess it depended on your edition.
Speaking of Kickstarters with lots of minis, Folklore the Affliction.
Yes.
When I kickstarted that, I was so excited because it came with the Creature Crate. And it has a ton of minis that came with that Kickstarter. And I love that game. It is so good. The minis, you use the minis basically when you do, it's more of a dungeon crawl experience. Several different aspects of the game. You're on the world map for some of it, and at that point you're not using miniatures, but then you'll get the little mini maps out. It's like a dungeon crawl. And that's when you bring your minis out, you have monsters you're fighting, and the minis are so well done. They're just beautiful, and once again, I don't have any of them painted. You don't get to see all the detail that is there. And I think that game would be one of those that, for me, would be far less exciting if there weren't miniatures in it. The map tiles that are laid out, they're beautiful map tiles. The artwork is awesome on them. The standees would be cool, but it wouldn't be quite the same without having the minis. Both the monsters and the heroes.
I think it makes a huge difference from when you go from world view to the dungeon crawler that you have the minis. I think that's one of the reasons why that game is so fantastic, is because it differentiates between those modes. You can play it for a longer amount of time without it feeling too stale or
monotonous or anything like that.
Yeah, we're just going to dive into the next dungeon.
Thinking about Gloomhaven, there's several games that use that model where miniatures for the main characters, then everything else that you're going to interact with is standees. Betrayal at House on the Hill and all of its versions, the Legacy, the Scooby-Doo version. Destinies is another one. Main characters are miniatures.
So you have minis for the characters, and then there's NPCs. I mean,
there's a couple minis for NPCs.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because it's one of the newer games that have come out where the minis I'm kind of confused by because they're so small. They have an impressive amount of detail for how small they are, but then it's kind of hard to tell which one is which setting up the game. Grab this dude with the blacksmith hammer, and I'm like, I think this is him.
Yeah, those are tiny miniatures.
Yeah. Those are mini miniatures.
Mini miniatures. Those are ones you probably ought to get painted.
So that's the game I should give to Autumn first.
Yes.
Okay, done.
There's so many games out there that have miniatures that our list is small compared to what's available on BGG. There's no way we're going to get to all the games that are on our list here. One that I really like that I don't play very often is Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea.
Oh yeah, those ones are good.
Those are big boxes. That's one of the few large box games that Scott Alms has made, who designed all the Tiny Epic games. Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea has a ton of miniatures. Each player has their set of miniatures, and it goes up to 6 players. Again, it uses those cardboard pieces to represent the boats or the flying ships that they have. Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea is a game I really enjoy, and it has a lot higher player count. It's more of a take-that game, which is not necessarily a big draw for our personal group, but I really enjoy that game. The miniatures on that look really good. The game plays really well. I should put that on my 10 for 10. It doesn't have the same feels, but for me it has the same kind of draw that Mythic Battles Pantheon did. I really want to play Mythic Battles Pantheon again. I thought that was a great game. Put Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea on that same list for me.
You know, I spent 20 seconds tonight on Kickstarter and I found another game that looks pretty cool with minis.
I'm sure there's more than one out there.
That's literally all it took me was Kickstarter minis. Oh, there's one.
Yeah. Andy, you talked about Hero Quest and the new version of it. Shadows of Brimstone, that has some really cool miniatures. Having all those miniatures really kind of adds to the anxiety of the game where you're feeling overwhelmed, especially when there's the ambush, when you reveal the room and there's the ambush, and all of a sudden all the heroes are surrounded by these mutants. Whoa, what do we do? And so I think Shadows of Brimstone's great, and that's another game also that has a ton of content. We talked about that a few episodes ago. Just a great game that is strongly enhanced by those miniatures.
And I think mostly with it, it's that moment when you're surrounded by the enemy. That's when it feels the most impacted with the minis.
Let's go back to 90s again. There was a game that I purchased that was called Dragon Quest, and it had minis for your heroes, and they were pewter minis. All the monsters were these folded up paper standees that had a colored picture of the monster on them.
So not even cardboard?
Not even cardboard. They were like a cardstock folded paper.
Wow, I can't imagine they lasted very long.
I still have them.
Oh.
Yeah. It was cool at the time, but you think about it, you fight a zombie, okay, a standee's not that big of a deal. You fight a dragon, having a dragon that's to scale, at least close to scale to what your actual heroes are, that adds to the level of the anxiety than having a little tiny paper standee that has a little dragon on it.
Yes.
So I think in certain instances, yeah, a standee's not that big of a deal. In other instances, a miniature can make the world of difference, especially with those more epic battles that if you're doing a battle or a fight or whatever. If it's something that's going to be big, that can make the game so much more exciting, and that battle to be memorable after you've played the game. So, oh yeah, remember that one time that was such a cool battle we fought, and that miniature makes that ingrained in your mind. It adds that level of excitement, that level of, I keep saying this word, but it makes it more cinematic. To me, anyway, it makes the game more memorable.
Going back to Descent, Legends of the Dark.
Oh, one of the last times I played, the mission used almost every single terrain tile, and it was so far spread out all over the Watson. And it was so tall, we had the big dragon skull thing in there too. It was impressive how big the map actually got. That cinematic feeling that you were talking about.
Yeah, where you're fighting that large dragonkin. You mentioned, Logan, where it was including the skeletal remains of the dragon. The skeletal remains of the dragon were cardboard, but were still larger than that sculpt of the dragonkin, which was also larger than the regular monsters. All of that depth and all that variety makes a big difference, which again takes me back to Nemesis, where you're looking at the different levels of the xenomorphs that are in that game. Queen is bigger and the different aliens. The scale of each of those just makes that game more memorable.
Oh yeah, because it makes a much bigger difference when your character gets ambushed by the queen, like you were just saying, or even an adult alien, versus one of the little lurkers or something in that game. I think a lot of that is to do with the size and scope of the minis in the game compared to your individual players.
One game that I have that I tried to play last year, was hoping to play several times, was Cyclades, which has a bunch of little miniatures.
Bunch of miniatures?
No, that's Destiny's. But it has several miniatures in that. One that is still on my list to play. Went through the rules several times. Never got it to the table. Unmatched. We've played that once together. That's one that I really want to dive more into for sure, to get a better feel for that game. The combat area control game, I like it because it's not super long. There's a variety of content that's available there. Massive Darkness, that's one that you bought from Dennis, right?
Yes. Actually, no. That is one I had already purchased, but I bought an expansion from Dennis. It's a dungeon crawler also. It's actually my son Caden's, it's his favorite dungeon crawler. Maybe it's because it was his first one he ever played, but he pesters me all the time to play Massive Darkness. The miniatures are amazing in that game. Whoever did the artwork on that did a phenomenal job.
And a massive amount of those sculpts, too.
Yes.
Dennis did have that. I played his copy. He brought in his big game tote. I think it had 2 game totes even. We were having to pull out, find these miniatures as we interacted with these guys. Fun game, but another one of those that just maybe got to the point where it was so overwhelming. Where do you store all that?
And, you know, that's kind of the downfall of games with lots of miniatures. Not just storage, but trying to find everything mid-game when something comes out and you're like, oh my gosh, where is it?
We ran into that issue with Shadows of Brimstone the other night.
We run into it with Descent 2nd Edition a lot, where you're fighting certain monsters and because you have miniatures everywhere. And Shadows of Brimstone has substantially more miniatures than Descent 2nd Edition does. Sometimes it's difficult. You try to organize everything to try to make it so it's easy, but when you have so much content, that is one of the downsides.
Games like Big Trouble in Little China, I think that's where they have the benefit, where they don't have nearly as much minis, but they come with that cheat sheet. So you're like, oh, we need to put out another Lords of Darkness. You're like, oh, and that's 3 rows down, 2 over from the right.
And it helps when you're cleaning up, too. Plastic that's formed for those miniatures, sometimes when the miniatures are all pulled out, this shape kind of looks like, nope, won't fit. This shape over here. In Big Trouble in Little China, it has that cheat sheet that shows you which miniatures go where. So in putting it back together, overwhelming miniatures. I go to Star Wars Legion. I have everything in Star Wars Legion up to going into episodes 1, 2, and 3. I condensed all those miniatures into giant Plano tackle box. And I use the same thing for Star Wars Imperial Assault, where I put everything into one minus the terrain tiles into a tackle box. Allows me to keep everything there, and then I have a second tote that I keep all of my terrain tiles in. But as we went through Star Wars Imperial Assault last year, it was great to be able to have everything right there. I didn't have to go search for everything. Kind of makes me feel sad that I took everything out of the box and threw away the box, but for convenience for me, I felt that was the way to go. You look at something like Massive Darkness, you're looking for all those miniatures and trying to find all those pieces, or Shadows of Brimstone, where we're trying to find all those terrain tiles in there and characters in the right rule book for the monsters that are in this expansion. Sometimes it's overwhelming. That's kind of the price you pay for a great game sometimes.
It is, and it pays to be organized, and there's different ways to get organized. For example, Gloomhaven, which is one of the benefits to the standees, right, is it's easier to organize those. I bought little mini pizza boxes, made some sticky labels, made covers for them, and on the spine of that pizza box, I labeled what's in there. And I put pictures on the outside of some of the stuff that's in there. Easier to organize. Okay, I need vermling. Okay, the vermlings are in this box. I can look at the spine. It's sitting in there like a book. Okay, the vermlings are in here. I can open it up, and it has everything that's vermling inside that box. Definitely easier to do that with something that's more along the lines of a standee than it is a mini, just because of the space. Otherwise, you have to move to something like a tackle box of some sort. For my Shadows of Brimstone stuff, I just reorganized it prior to BryceCon, just in case we played it down there. And I just have all my stuff in 2 of those huge boxes, organized them in there, and put them all together, and then hoped that the boxes didn't get shifted too much to disorganize it.
They didn't self-destruct.
Because they're just standing freely in there. The problem with a game like that is there's so much content, not in just minis, but with tokens too. I bought a little tackle box thing for all the tokens, just to organize the tokens, because there's so much. At some point, do you walk into a game and bring in 4 tackle boxes, 3 or 4 game boxes for all your map tiles, which is kind of where I would be at this point, and then I still don't have all the content.
You're still missing quite a bit of content
Yeah.
in that. We have just touched the tip of the iceberg of games that include miniatures. We have a long list of games that we didn't get to, and there's an even longer list of games that are out there. Next week, we're going to be talking about a few different games to continue this discussion, so we'll talk about those. Reach out to us at meeplenation@gmail.com and let us know what miniature game is the top of your list. Let us know what game that you felt that maybe we knocked on too much or praised too much. meeplenation@gmail.com.
Send a picture to us of the random Kickstarter you find today that has cool minis on it.
Or a game that you love. We love pictures. Post some pictures of games that you love to have minis.
At our Facebook group, Meeple Nation Off Air.
Until next time.
We'll see you sorting out your minis and putting them on the game table. At the game table.
As always, we want to thank you for listening.
Check out our website. We have all sorts of cool things there. Love those blogs. Get a deeper look into the writing side of Meeple Nation.
Join our Facebook group, Meeple Nation Off Air. I look forward to seeing you there.
Follow us on Twitter @Meeple Nation. We also have Instagram.
Under the same name. We also want to thank our sponsor, GameToppersLLC.com.
We love their product, and they have so much goodness out there.
And we also want to thank Brain Detergent for our music.
Question though, are the legs a valuable award that's from Italian? From the Italian countryside?
Watch out, they might be Ragile. So that's funny note that I'm going to probably edit out. But there's a big debate in that show where people think that he says fragile, and he doesn't say fragile, he says ragile, because the F is not on the crate. And so his wife points out that I think it's fragile. But that's neither here nor there. Fun fact for the back of the episode, I guess. Anyways, go to...
Interesting facts now brought to you by Meeple Nation and Game Toppers LLC. Check them out.
On our
Oh, yeah?
Indeed.
Star Wars X-Wing X word?
Are we like not swearing?
Yeah, Star Wars X word.
I keep saying this word, but it makes it more somatic. Is that right?
Cinematic.
Cinematic.
Like Cinnabon.
Almost like a Cinnabon.
We have just touched the iceberg. Really. We have just touched the tip of the iceberg. Let us know. Reach out